Hi everybody, and welcome to today's Hangout on Air series for the 2016 Computer Science for High School grant in EMEA. Our topic of conversation today is communities of practice, and I'm thrilled to have a really experienced panel of speakers who are joining me for our session today. I'll introduce them shortly, or let them introduce themselves. But first of all, I just want to let you know what we're going to cover in the next half an hour and what you can expect from the session. So, what we're going to cover is just a brief introduction to communities of practice, because we're especially looking for applicants this year who may be new to communities of practice, as well as those who have some experience of this area of professional development already. I want to talk specifically about what we're looking for in our Computer Science for High School application form in relation to communities of practice and the questions that you'll be asked to answer. And then I'm going to throw open some questions to our experienced panelists and let them tell you about the different formats of communities of practice they've come across, what they regard as successful communities of practice, and what are the things that we can learn from best practice. For example, the work of the Computing at School movement in the UK. There'll also be lots of time for your questions, so feel free to post them at any point. There should be a section just under the video here where you can post your questions. So feel free to do that at any time over the next 30 minutes, and we'll try and get around to as many of them as we can. So, communities of practice and professional development, and why have Google introduced this element to the application form for CS4HS 2016. Well, we know from research across the region and also through our own work in terms of investigating the impact of the CS4HS grant in the US that communities of practice have a huge impact on the success of professional development for computer science. We know that it improves teachers' abilities to adopt new skills, to implement new content, and ultimately change their practice in the classroom. Some of the key aspects of how a community of practice does this is through peer-to-peer professional development. So really, encouraging teachers to learn from one another and learn together as they go through a PD experience. Having an ongoing year-round supportive community that they know they can tap into at any time for advice, giving them the time and some sort of a structure to reflect on their practice has been shown in a lot of research to be really critical in terms of actually getting teachers to take on what they've learned and implement it in the classroom with their students. And then even just something as simple as giving them a structure to exchange ideas for teaching computer science and interacting with like-minded others. So these are just some of the highlights from existing research and from our own impact study in the US. And so we want to see if we can bring some of this into the EMEA region, into Europe, Middle East, and Africa, into the fantastic work that's already going on, to really add to what you're already doing and to build it onto your proposals for PD for this year. So the specific questions we have on our application form, there are just 4, but we want you to try and answer them as best you can. So we'll ask you to describe the format that your community of practice will take. And just a quick note on this question, that is, if you want to plug into an existing community of practice that's already established in your region and that's already effective, then that's totally fine. Just explain the format of how that will work and how it will work with your organization if you're going to be partnering with somebody else. We'll also want to know about your plans for keeping participants engaged in the community throughout the year, particularly after any face-to-face workshops. We'll want to know what percentage of your requested funds will be allocated to the community of practice, with a requirement that 10% of the budget minimum is allocated, but you can always allocate more, so just to describe that. And then the final question will be about how you'll measure the outcomes of the community of practice, what you'll do to measure the outcome of that element of your PD experience. So I'm hoping that in fact I know that our experienced panelists are going to help you get some ideas for how you'll answer and approach these questions. So without further ado, it's a pleasure to introduce, I'll let Sue sentence and kick off. Sue, if you could just say hello to everybody and introduce yourself. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Sue Sentence. It's good to be here on this Hangout. I've worked for Computing at School in the UK for a little while, and I specialise in teacher professional development, and also I work for King's College London training teachers in computer science.
Great, thanks, Sue. And Riaz, if you could introduce yourself next. Welcome from South Africa.
Hi, thanks so much. Great to be on this call. My name is Riaz. I'm from South Africa, but I'm currently based in the UK. I'm a recent computer science graduate from the University of Cambridge. But back in South Africa, I run something called Tailoring Development, which is the largest community of software developers in the region. My experience is with communities of practice and more around communities of practice of university students and alternative types of plots. So great to be here today.
Thanks, Riaz. And finally, Simon, over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Claire. Yes, Simon Humphries. I'm the coordinator for Computing at School. Former teacher. I taught for 25 years, both in music departments and then latterly in computer science departments before getting fully engaged with the Computing at School program.
Great, thanks, Simon. And maybe I'll throw the first question out to you, if that's okay. Could you just explain to us in your own words what you understand to be a community of practice and what it means, especially for folks on the call who may be completely new to this idea?
I believe the community of practice phrase was first coined by a chap called Etienne Wenger. And his quote says that communities of practice are groups of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. And so I have to confess, in the early days when we kicked off the Computing at School community and started our regional hubs and other programs that we had, I wasn't actually aware that what we were doing was building a community of practice, and it was other folks like Sue and other academics who had read the research who then pointed me to say, you know, the phrase we have is community of practice, and that's led me into further research. But I think for us within Computing at School, where we have a significant number of teachers that are new to the subject, well, that satisfies our groups of people. There's clearly a concern in their minds in that they feel that they don't know enough about the subject and the pedagogy of the subject to deliver it adequately. So there's that concern, and we certainly have a passion to see that they will do that as best as they possibly can, and to increase their confidence, and that through enabling them to collaborate and to connect in their local communities and try to do it where possible face to face, they'll learn more about the subject and how to teach it better. And I think that enabling them in their local communities to interact regularly through the local hub network is the way that we try to deliver the ethos and approach of the community of practice.
That's great. Thanks, Simon. And I think you've raised a lot of really interesting points there already, which we'll dive into deeper in a second. But Sue, same question to you, or if you've anything to add in terms of your understanding of a community of practice and what it means.
Well, exactly as Simon says, it's this collection of people. I think it's important to define what the practice is that the community of practice are sharing in, and certainly in our case we're looking at people in Computing at School who have in common that they are facing a curriculum change, working with a new subject. And when you get this a common goal and this shared interest like this, there is a great benefit in working towards it together. So I think a key element of the community of practice is this recognition of the benefits of being in it together. That's more or less what Simon is saying. But I also want to say that the community of practice can work at different levels. So you can have a national community of practice, you know, with everybody in the country with a particular shared goal or what they're working together on, or quite a small local community of practice of teachers within a school working on something in particular.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. And I know, Riaz, you've got some experience in terms of at the national level, but also very much in terms of the localized community working together. So again, same question to you, just your general understanding of what a community of practice means, if you want to pick up on any extra points there.
Sure. So like Simon was saying earlier, I wasn't aware what we were doing was a community of practice until something from Google actually brought up that phrase. But we've actually been running an online community of practice, which has been able to scale nationally a lot easier, and also helps us locally in South Africa where the distances are just so big. But it's just so encouraging to see that you can have an online community that can do real work and can face with one another over long periods of time. And my experience with that actually doesn't come from this Hyperion project, but actually playing online games. Games like World of Warcraft, while they may seem, kind of completely unrelated, are actually very strongly driven by communities of people who play this game to get the same outcomes in the game. And the extent to which people go and the activities that they do together in these games is quite amazing, and what actually inspired me to look more into an online type of community of practice. So linking it up to what computing at school is doing and what you can do on the ground in real life is quite interesting.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much. Really, some really interesting insights there. And that idea that even you guys, who I would consider experts in the field, didn't realize you were doing a community of practice until you were doing it, or until someone put the label on it, is fascinating. And I wonder, is that one of the tenets of success in terms of, for the teacher, should they almost be going through something that they don't realize that they're part of, or that it's just kind of a natural, it naturally happens around them, rather than it feeling sort of forced in any way? Is that one of the key aspects of a community and something that makes it successful, or not?
I think within that there's a notion here of leadership, isn't there? And I think who actually leads this community of practice. And I quite like the picture that in the individual communities within our local hubs, in our towns and villages and school communities, that actually it's the teachers themselves that are taking the ownership for this and empowered to kind of set their own agendas for what they need in connection with their other teachers, without needing necessarily to be imposing too much from on high, as it were.
Can I just interject?
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, I agree with Simon that teachers need to take ownership and support each other. But I think also, if you are trying to facilitate a community practice, you need to sort of somehow make those opportunities happen. So in computing at school, we have a very popular forum where people can discuss what all the issues to do with problems they have with their teaching or whatever. And so where we noticed that some people were feeling a little bit intimidated by that, we had a new area that said no problem too stupid or something, where we could give teachers who were feeling less secure the more opportunity to ask questions. So I think, as well as it's important that teachers own it, but at the same time there is a responsibility for those who are facilitating it to make sure that it works properly for teachers. And I also think that face-to-face opportunities are really important in community practice, because it's actually it's professional relationships that are the key element to me of a community of practice, that people actually working together and feel that they have got the relationship with the person that they're working with.
Yeah, so you've just touched on the two key formats, I guess, of communities of practice that would spring to mind, one being face-to-face and the other being online. Could you perhaps pick one community that you've had involvement with and just describe to us the exact format, just so people on the call who may not have done this before would get a sense of what this looks like in practice?
Well, if I pick on the Computing at School Hub as one example, this is a meeting, a group of people in a local area, a collection of schools around a certain area that meet together every half term or term every few months or so, discuss issues around teaching. There might be a speaker, or there might be just a bring and share of resources and things that are issues. And it's completely free to attend. It happens when a time when teachers are free, just after school, and it's a core part of the activity that's actually made computing at school such a successful community of practice. So I think that's a good face-to-face example of a community of practice in practice.
Great. And Simon, anything else to add to the? I know there are other elements to the CAS model. There's a very active online community as well. So I guess that adds another dimension to the community.
Yes, yes, it does. I want to focus, I think, as much on the face-to-face, because I think within our particular community as teachers, I think teachers are people, and so what they do every day of their life is deal with people face-to-face in their classroom. So that's their kind of natural habitat, if you like. And online communities are not necessarily their natural habitat, though we're becoming more accustomed to it. I want you to drop in another aspect that I think is so critical to a successful community of practice, and I wouldn't suggest that we in CAS have got this completely right yet, but it's certainly an aim that's always in front of us, is that these places need to be safe. They need to be places where these teachers feel confident and free to ask, as Sue said on our online forum, what they might think is the stupid question. It's got to be a safe place where they feel comfortable and feel as if they are amongst colleagues, friends.
Yeah, I think that's a really critical point, and something that we've seen in other communities across the world, especially in the US, the really successful ones. So really key point. So somewhere really safe for the teachers to build their confidence and grow their self-esteem, I guess, and in terms of changing their practice and taking on ideas in the classroom. Riaz, over to you. What are the benefits that you've seen of the different formats of communities that you've been involved with, whether it's face-to-face or online?
Well, as I mentioned before, with online, certainly you're able to bridge physical gaps and physical distances that are not easy to bridge if you're trying to do something face-to-face. With online too, there's a sense of, appealing more to certain types. So in the community we run, which is more university students, younger generation, computer scientists, software developers are quite keen to join in online communities where they may actually not want to join face-to-face. So as a kind of complete opposite to what Simon has been saying, they may feel more comfortable working online rather than working face-to-face, because that's what they do every day. And so how this translates to teachers, though, I'm not entirely sure. But it is something interesting to consider, I guess.
I think it's the same point ultimately, though, because it's really tailoring to the needs of your audience or your teachers. So I think in this case of CAS, they found something that has worked for teachers, because they know what they want. But in your case, you've developed something that's really tuned into the audience of university students. So I think the message is look to what your audience want and what their needs are, and build something for them. Great. So we have touched on a few of the successes of communities practice. Is there anything else that anybody wants to add in terms of what are the other successes that we've missed, or that you might like to share with others from your experience?
I think it's important to give, well, in our case, teachers, different opportunities to get involved in different ways. So some people want to get much more involved than others. They want to become sort of lead teachers in a subject. They want to take part. Others want to be less involved, or we started different types of group. We have groups around inclusion and research and things, and I think different opportunities to getting involved is important, and also the different being aware that people have different constraints, times that they can engage, evenings, weekends, daytimes, whatever, and that try to make what's available as flexible as possible.
I think I'd add within that, and it's absolutely right. I think when we look at the structure of the meetings that are run by folks all over the country on behalf of CAS, it's the giving teachers an opportunity just to talk to each other without necessarily having any set agenda can be hugely beneficial. And it's important to have a structure to a meeting. I'm not saying have no structure, but giving teachers time, space to share with each other is very important.
Yeah, and that's, yeah, super. And to go to the other side, to flip the coin then, any challenges, Simon, that you want to call out that are worth mentioning and that others could perhaps build into their plans, in fact, to try and, you know, overcome them from the outset, or to be aware of them in terms of challenges or pitfalls along the way?
Okay, a couple of challenges possibly. One would be that all our hub leaders act as volunteers. So inevitably, constraints in their own working life and their own constraints in their own family life might mitigate them against being able to hold a hub meeting any one term or something, and that's a factor. Periodically, one might be concerned. I'm no great fan of the phrase quality assurance or quality control, but there's some aspect of that where you really want the teachers to feel that they're giving up their time to attend these meetings, and we don't seek to control how those hub leaders run those meetings. There's a lot of trust goes involved in that, which again I think is a very positive aspect of any good community of practice, is that you are trusting the people out there doing this work. But every so often, you may need to step in and say, that didn't work out quite as well as it could have done. What can we do to support you more?
And before I go to the others on challenges, Simon, just to ask, to pick up on that point, how does it work between CAS as a central organisation and the regional hubs? How much empowerment do you give to the hubs to drive things in their own direction, while also maintaining the overall goals and objectives of CAS in terms of what you're trying to achieve? How do you strike that balance?
I think it's something that we're constantly working towards. I'd like to think that we have got that balance. I mean, we provide guidance for those people who volunteer to be hub leaders. We have on occasion provided training for them, and we need to be doing more of that, making them feel special in the community. And we're just putting together sort of a resource pack for those hub leaders to give them a starting point. But we provide support at the end of an email client or at the end of the phone when hub leaders have got questions or they want further help. And we just do our best to keep in touch with them as best we can. And now we're trying to do that through our various regional centres as well.
Really interesting. Riaz, any challenges that you would like to alert people to, that you've encountered and tried to overcome?
Sure. So especially when it comes to trying to establish communities of practices in, say, the developing world, there can be a lot of confusion or misunderstanding about what a community of practice is. Especially when we sit in South Africa, a lot of people will think that this is just about training, an organization that wants to train people. And so separating that out is very important. So we're currently in the process of trying to establish our teaching community of practice. But often when we engage with the South African government, there's a misunderstanding that this is about, providing training for teachers, where a community of practice at a teacher's level can very much be about what happens after this training. How can teachers themselves, have, like Simon said, a safe space to discuss issues that arise after training and more broadly their field. So if you are going to start a community of practice, bear in mind that when you try to convince people, explain to them what it is, it can be kind of hard to get that across at the start.
Great, yeah, really important point. And Sue, over to you for challenges.
Well, I'd second the point that Simon made about making sure that people who volunteer their time feel valued. I think it's challenging to do that, but it's really important that you do, and you really respect everybody's contribution that they're making to the community. I think also we have a lot of resources shared by teachers, so I think just making sure that there's the right environment so that people feel that they can it's quite a lot of sort of giving from yourself if you're sharing something that you've developed or used in school, and making sure that that feels okay to everybody, and that people respect what's being shared and don't say go and use it without recognizing that that's somebody else's work and that sort of thing. That's the second thing. And then I think also the I think Simon probably said this as well, but the time that you need to support those people who are taking a big role in the sort of more local communities of practice is we never have enough of it, really. We don't have enough sort of people at the core to kind of support all the people who need that support, but it's just a matter of trying to organise everything so that you can find it.
Thanks, Sue, and I think you've rolled the answer to my last question into your response there in terms of advice to others who may be either starting a community of practice or trying to grow one. So we just have a couple of minutes left and no questions coming from the audience. So Simon, I'll just ask you perhaps to give us one piece of advice in terms of what could other regions learn from what CAS have done in terms of their setting up of communities of practice.
I think focus on what mentioned it already. Focus on what the audience needs, and where there are teachers, it's enabling teachers to deliver materials and support and resources for other teachers, because they're the people that will know best what is required. And we've used the phrase community of practice a lot, obviously, this afternoon, and I wonder if that's a hurdle. So it was quite refreshing, I think, that I'd never heard of this notion of community of practice early on. So there was no intention for CAS, hey, we're going to start a community of practice. Actually, it was, why don't we get together and talk computer curriculum? Let's share our ideas. How's it going on with your exam classes? What are you doing with your 11-year-olds next Monday for teaching them how to program and so on? So it was very much about striking with the interests and needs of the teachers first and foremost, and then creating that framework for the timing and where they would meet and what they would be talking about that would be suiting and fitting their needs.
Great, thanks Simon. And Riaz, 1 minute to give us your key piece of advice.
I'd say it can be hard to try to start these things, to make volunteers feel valued and continue on to lead whatever kind of initiative you're trying to do. It may take time to find the right people. It may take time to find a way to reward people. But I'd say don't stop trying, because in the long run these things really pay off. But take time.
Thanks, Riaz. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We're almost out of time, so I just want to firstly say a huge thank you to our 3 panelists for joining the discussion today and for creating such a wealth of information for our audience about communities of practice. I almost wish we had another 30 minutes. This call has been too short, but perhaps we can pick it up on another day. So thanks to Sue and to Simon and to Riaz for joining the call today. And just want to wrap up by reminding those of you who are live on the call, if you want to share this with somebody afterwards, it will be up on our YouTube channel. So if you join the G+ community or just look for the CS4HS channel on YouTube, you'll find recordings of today's Hangout on Air, last week's one, and the series from the US as well. Some of the content will be relevant to folks in EMEA, so some of those are worth a watch as well. And finally, just a reminder that our application date our applications close on the 15th of February, so be sure to get your application into us before then, cs4hs.com/application. And I'm looking forward to receiving applications from many of you, so best of luck, and thanks again. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.